All right. So in 2019, some context here, I went on a quest to find organizations that actually made sustainable change. And that journey had brought three things. First, the Sustainable Happy Profit. And that's the book, How Products and Organizations, in fact, can thrive. Two, the Agile Sustainability Manifesto. That's how we evolve our craft and guide our decision. And then three, the Agile Sustainability Practitioner 4 Weeks Hands-on Program. But before I get ahead of myself, I've structured this time that we have together this way, sort of on a slight diamond shape, beyond just diversion and conversion, but also leveling up the playing field, hence this diamond shape. And then, of course, some touch of liberating structure, but just the flavor of it. So we're going to go through three areas: what, state of affairs, so what, why is this significant, why it matters, and then now what, the end sort of action-oriented section, so that you are ready for you to tackle, roll up your sleeve, and get on with it as soon as we leave this room. Surely you heard the global warming and the rather scary predictions. Some of you may have read at least the highlight reports of the latest IPCC. We could be looking at GDP and how, in fact, GDP is not a good economic, healthy measure of an economic system, or how, in fact, GDP is decoupled of our harming emissions. We could also be looking at multiple different variables and how do they correlate to the Industrial Revolution and the things that we do as one species. Now, what I don't want to do is to add to the overload, to the overwhelm, every bit of energy as feeling uncomfortable, feeling urgency, feeling outrage. Those bits of energy, we better put them into place for something productive. Now, in the subject of sustainability, there is a huge feedback delay. We know, Agile people, how that plays, right? So imagine if we had a magic switch to turn off all the greenhouse gas emissions right now, it will take decades, if not centuries, to see what we have already emitted into the atmosphere. So what I want to do now is go through some questions that I think we should really be asking ourselves. How will we feed ourselves? And now this is a question for the room, so hands up. Who here works somehow related in our food system? Okay, look around. This is going to increase year on year. Our food system is a broken, complex, adaptive system, and that's where we, Agile people, come in. Our current food system doesn't work for everyone and certainly does not work for the environment. The majority is petrochemical agriculture, and petrochemical agriculture has turned agriculture into one of the leading sources of greenhouse gas emissions and pollution, and is driving extinction of species. And it has a huge financial cost, not just in terms of biodiversity, ecosystem service, but in health. And just if we look at it on a very simple math of inputs, think of land use, water use, pollution, energy, taxpayers' money. Like when we say it's expensive or less expensive, this is our taxpayer money because most of the things are holding up through subsidiaries. And not only we produce food in a way that doesn't work in the long term, but we almost waste a third of it, whilst 10% of the world's population go hungry. We, Agile people, know that we can do better. How would we harness energy, and how would we store what we learn? Now, I ask this because I imagine most of us, somehow our work is related to technology, and technology, in my mind, is no longer an industry. It's essentially a fabric layer of any business. And IT, information and technology, needs these two things. Now, if we are uncovering better ways of delivering technology by doing it and helping others to do it, I think we're missing part of the picture. Really, AI and quantum computing are really pushing these figures. Internet alone, responsible for 4% of greenhouse gas emissions. We know we tried accumulation of data alone does not drive better decisions. Our grids are at a stretch, like energy grids, and they cannot handle the forecast. So the question here for us in this room is, how can we better respond to change? How will we make things? And I ask this question because we often think, especially in the digital sphere, that our work is somehow decoupled and abstract, this non-physical thing. When we are very bounded to the physical world, we are very bounded to materials. We are bounded to governing natural laws, regardless if we like it or not, if we are aware of it or not. Now, if in Agile, we aim to increase predictability and control risk, well, here are some risks. We are already behaving and consuming at the rate of almost 2 planet Earths. And if everybody was behaving and consuming in the way that we do in the tiny slither of the world, northwest side of the world, we would be at a rate of 5 Earths. And that is not sustainable. We need to be more lean. And we certainly need to be more agile. How would we heal ourselves? And here also a question for the room. So who works here somehow related to the healthcare system? This is one of the fastest growing industries, and that includes biotech. Yet again, a broken, complex, adaptive system, and that's where we come in. Just think about air pollution alone is responsible of 4 million human deaths a year. And it's not just pollution. We know that weather changes has a direct health implication and fluctuation of diseases. So as practitioners, how can we help such an interdependent, complex industry with huge stresses and demands? Systems thinking, anyone? And how would we conduct business? Which affect us, each and every one of us, as a stakeholder, as customer, as employee, as participant, active participant of our civil life. And this, the state of business, is the focus of my research and work. And I can tell you something now. There is a better way to the business. Because our business as usual is the most unusual. We looked at air pollution. We are pushing 1 billion species threatened to extinction. We converted more than 75% of land, and 6 of the 9 greatest threats to the world are directly related to ongoing destruction of nature, and that's destruction made by us, humans, one species. So this is our current state of affairs, and we can do better. So let's just pause for a minute and ask yourself this question. What is one thing that is becoming more clear? And how is that related to your work? Now hold that thought. Here is where I introduce you a framework, and as we know, frameworks can be very helpful. Is what's called the planetary boundaries, so a visual representation of it. I think it's a great graphic because you can see it's a sort of information radiator. Anything that stays within the green area, we are in the safe operating space. Anything beyond that, well, we gone over. And I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't look great, but let's not go into despair, because we have already in the past turned around things at the speed, at the volume globally. We've done this before. Like, remember the ozone layer, that's a success story that we should remind ourselves we can do it again. So planetary boundaries one end, and Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, the other end. And 17 global goals that we ought to achieve as a species, some of which has targets earlier than others. For example, we are to halve our emissions by 2030. That's about 5 years from now. And that's halving emissions as a globe, country, city, department, company, product, weekend activity, household, individual level. We are to halve our emissions. And those are legally binding agreements. Now, some of the Sustainable Development Goals are very highly correlated to and related to the planetary boundaries, but many other ones are to what's called or bundled as the social capital. Now, if we sort of bring the two things together, this is the framework I wanted to talk to you about, which is donut economics. And it's called donut economics because it has the shape of a donut, where we have in the outer layer our ecological ceiling. We don't want to surpass that. We want to stay in our safe operating space. And then the inner circle is our social foundation, where we don't leave anyone behind. We don't leave people behind in terms of access to food, water, health, energy, housing, political voice, peace and justice. And I'm one of the organizations in actions for the Donut Economic Action Lab. And in that QR code, you have stories, tools that I put out there under the Creative Commons that you can tap into. Now, this framework is collaborative, is adaptive, is holistic to economic development that accounts for the real world, not these abstract, incomplete concepts. So just quickly to tell you a story, the way that we put these frameworks in practice, these big ideas in terms of sustainability into our context, it doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be overly complex. So right here, you see some snaps of a session that last year I facilitated, sort of appended from a conference about a tangible application of this donut economics framework. We had more than 70 attendees. And also just to say that this session doesn't have to be an all-day thing. Things can be incremental and iterative. Start small, learn fast. And we often in sustainability, we look at these two angles, right? Is it politics, is it population? What can we do at the individual level, at the masses, versus maybe it's policies and laws. And then we know that policies and laws are too slow and have loopholes. Now, what is obvious to me is that bang in the middle, what we have is a great opportunity, and that is organizations. Think about this, we have 333 million registered companies in the world. So that's a huge potential for evolving our practice to make a dent, a positive impact in big numbers, right? 333 million versus 249 country codes. And organizations, companies are composed of individuals. And we can do both. We can do good and we can do well. In fact, it's more rewarding. Not only that, but we are incredibly privileged, not just for being here today, but as Agile people, we have access and we have ease. With that, I mean access to key areas of the organization and ease of skilled tools already under our belt. I did say I went on this quest, and through the quest of finding organizations that embedded sustainability as part of their fabric, patterns, mechanisms, very clear strategies sort of surfaced. And that's really where Sustainable Happy Profit came about. For me to be able to share those ideas beyond one customer, one talk, one session at a time. And I must admit, it was tough, especially when the narratives and operations were very dissonant. Like greenwashing, anyone? So let me take you through very quickly 3 different industries and companies examples from this quest. So this is an energy company, and they managed to turn around their figures within 10 years from 80 fossil to 20 renewables, to the other way around, 85 renewables. In fact, huge operations, you can see almost 10 million people, and an expectation by 2030 of 50 million people. And one of the things that they did was anchor. They anchored so they could change course. And I thought was interesting to explain that, I mean, imagine the huge operations, the cost, the infrastructure that they have in place, right? So they took this inventory list, like an asset inventory list, and every single end of life was taken as an opportunity for better replacement, refit, repurpose, recycle, right? And investing where they want the world to go. And this is only being one of the initiatives that they put in place. And these and other efforts within 10 years have resulted 30% of profit increase down to the P&L level, really valuing adaptive to change. Now, this is a servicing company. So we looked at energy. This is a financial servicing company, and the figures speak for themselves. Essentially, what's called ethical portfolios are performing better. And imagine if we had ethical portfolios by default, including our pensions. But one of the things I wanted to share with you is that for them, it was clear that yes, halving emissions, but also looking at where they could have their biggest impact. And I think that's a question we should be asking ourselves, our own organizations, finding our niche. Where is your most impact that you can take? For them, it was niche funding, right? Supporting organizations and efforts, aligning with their purpose, one of which they had more than 150 companies, partnerships involved, one including the WWF. And that for me really talks about not just looking for customer collaboration, but the whole value chain collaboration. And that's right in line with the Sustainable Development Goal 17, which is partnership for the goals. And we know in this room what a lever that is. We want to go far, we better go together. And this is a manufacturing company. I wanted to touch different industries. They not only managed to reduce the absolute emissions by 70%, but also they focus on really the age of co-creation after finding better ways of doing things, created their own framework, basically to look at an employee, to look and support each employee as a problem solver. You are closer to the problem, and giving the support to be able, right? Coming together, enriching each other's ideas. And they have huge operations. And I'm certain here we have many stories when in fact we value more individuals and interactions. All right, so you are ready to start this quest within your own organization. But I want to be honest, you are going to be confronted with resistance. And what I would like to do now is take you through my top 5 myths and equip you in a way that you can fight them. Myth 1, which is, oh, people don't care. Well, people do care. 75% of the workforce will refuse to work for organizations without corporate social responsibility, social and environmental. Customers willing to pay more. Again, remember some of the costs today are holding up through subsidiaries, so we are paying through our tax anyway. And also investors. Investors are eager to find those ethical portfolios. That's our stakeholders, employees, customers, investors. And for the ones that read and remember the About section of the original Agile Manifesto, really building the types of organizational communities that we want to work for, we want to be part of. Myth 2 is like, oh, this sounds expensive, and may come with many flavors, like, oh, we don't really have funds or allocated budget, and like excuses. But let's look at this on expenses, because renewables is official. Those are cheaper. And not only when you compare kilowatt hours, but also the reduced long-term cost, maintenance cost, extraction cost, transportation, right? We don't tend to think about these things. So that's energy. Materials, well, we saw. We are checking 99% of stuff we buy within 6 months. 90% of the materials in our products are wasted. So imagine keeping them within your value stream, or don't put them there to start. And especially there is one fact that really stood with me, that is that there is more gold in e-waste. That's stuff like this we no longer use. There is more gold in e-waste than left on the ground. I mean, what are we doing? So energy, materials, and regeneration. I have this motto of leaving the place better than how we found it. Right? The place, the product, the people, the planet, in everything I do. And in this notion of regeneration, right, we need to go beyond mission zero. We talked about our food system. Regenerative agriculture not only reduces greenhouse gas emissions, sinks carbon into the soil, increases biodiversity, improves water, air quality, also generates higher results, and creates a resilient system, right? So if something happens here, you can still feed your nation. Those are big problems. So what about if we start harnessing change for competitive advantage? Myth 3 is like, oh, but you know, we are bounded to political and market systems. Or you may hear this coming in disguise of, there's no point of doing anything. I don't have enough influence. Political systems respond to people. And through history, we have examples of successfully overcoming at extraordinary odds to achieve political change. Also, tipping points are not linear. The myth of, oh, but what about growth and profit? But let's look where growth and profit are going, because just plots. This is figures from the US on 1960 million on the first quarter of the year, literally down the drains into our oceans. And for every 1% increase of rainfall, our GDP was about 2%. So that's water. But if we look at fires, I have figures from California 17 and 18, which quarter-century profits for the insurance company just went up in flames. And we know that this is not just in California, it's happening often, it's happening close. And around 1% of GDP annually lost on fire. And then don't forget that we have weaker and weaker value chains. It's becoming obvious. Conflicts, wars, epidemic will happen again. Supply logistics, like the drought of Panama Canal. And here are some examples of companies that they just had to shut operations for 10 days. So if at regular intervals, we are to reflect on how to become more effective and then tune and adjust accordingly, I think we're missing part of the picture. And then the top 5 is like, this is too complex. It is too complex. We're talking about the biosphere. That we don't have to do it alone. And just by achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 12 trillion up for grabs. Now, if our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of value, let's get on with that. Also, remember, that may sound very so complex, but not long ago, we managed to turn around things at the fraction of the time, at the size that we wouldn't have imagined in different circumstances. We should give ourselves some credit too. We've done it before, we can do it again. And I think this visual explains very well where we at. In change, or we're confronting a challenge, we know as Agile practitioners, we sort of have this tendency to look at the things in quite narrow way. We're missing part of the picture. And in complex adaptive systems, well, there is more to consider than just the common sort of inertia. So yes, we are to halve our emissions within 5 years. Also, we need to account for our biodiversity loss. We have to tackle our overconsumption. Especially when you look at the value chain, one thing that we fall complacent into is really understanding the whole value chain. And the golden rule here is that when something is too good to be true, it often is. So I want to point you to this organization, Stop the Traffic, that I collaborate with. And the sole mission is prevention of human trafficking and modern slavery. And I call this out because it's closer than you think. It's in our food chains, in our energy, materials, devices, the clothes that we wear, the stuff that we use, and it's also in our healthcare system. It's not in faraway lands, it's right here. So let's take a moment and ask yourself, what is one thing that is becoming more apparent? And how is that related to your work? Now hold that thought. I'm going to give you a great networking opportunity. During the day, reach out to someone you haven't spoken with yet and share this. What is more apparent? And how is this related to our work? Because we want to go far, we better go together. Now, I may, looking at time, need to fly through some of this. I'm a circular economy professional from Cambridge University, and that's something that I can share some more info, but essentially it's a very helpful way I found over the years to help bringing these big ideas into the context of how we design and evolve our products and practice. In the name of time, I'll fly through some of this. Do remember, though, our privilege. We have access and we have ease. So where do you want the world to go? How do you want to be part of it? And what's between then and now? Therefore, what's next? So I want to give you 3 very tangible things that you can do now. 1, if you haven't yet, please check out the Agile Sustainability Manifesto and take the pledge, put your name on it. Most importantly, leverage the 4 values, 8 principles to guide our decisions. I mean, it's really time for us to take our craft up a notch. It's been long enough. 2, head over the Green Software Foundation. I'm one of the champions for the Green Software Foundation. You have things like the impact framework that you can already tap into with your team. And also in this QR code there, you have a free course on green software. And even you are not in IT, remember, technology is a fabric layer. It's a well worth base level that is gonna open awareness and wider understanding of the things that we can do now in our products. And then 3, come and join us in one of the cohorts of the Coalition of the Willing. A bunch of Agile practitioners came together and put this 4 weeks program, not just to learn about circular economy, sustainable development goals, and complexity science, but essentially to bridge the gap from theoretical agreement, we should do something, to actual impactful action. And that's where we lose people the most. Like, it's the hardest step in any change, moving from urgency to agency. This is how we've been running this since last year. So please have a look and come and join us. I would like to close with this thought. This is home. There are no boundaries. We all breathe the same air. This is our home, which is not ours alone.